For you, the listeners of My JavaScript Story, Loot Crate is offering an opportunity to save 10% on any new subscription at lootcrate.com. Just enter the promo code BRIDGE10 for 10% savings. Loot Crate is one of my favorite things. Every month I get a box in the mail, costs less than $20, and it comes with all kinds of goodies. I have stuff from, just looking at my shelf, Batman, Spider-Man, Ninja Turtles, Back to the Future, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, and much, much more. So if you're a geek, a gamer, anything like that, and you want cool stuff to put around your office, cool t-shirts, comic books, etc., then definitely check out Loot Crate. To save 10% on your new subscription, go to lootcrate.com/Ruby. Again, that's lootcrate.com/Ruby to save 10% on any new subscription. Enter the promo code BRIDGE10 for 10% savings. Hey everybody, and welcome to another My JavaScript Story. This week we're talking to Jonathan Carter. Jonathan, do you want to say hi?
Hey everybody. Thanks for having me, Charles.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Do you want to give just a brief introduction since we haven't had you on the show for a while?
Yeah. So as you said, my name is Jonathan Carter. I'm a PM at Microsoft. Actually just had my 10-year anniversary at Microsoft, so I've been out here quite a while. Been a web developer for over 15 years, and then in my time at Microsoft, had the opportunity to work on tooling and platform pieces for nearly every kind of JavaScript application possible, from mobile, web, desktop, and so kind of had a lot of fun in the JavaScript space over the last decade. That's kind of me.
Cool. And we had you on for a special episode we did about Azure. Sponsored by Microsoft. And
as part of that tour of duty at Microsoft, worked on our Node.js development story for Azure as part of the last year. And then, right now I'm kind of doing more tooling stuff in the Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code side of the house. So
very cool. Yeah, I wind up talking to John Papa on a regular basis. He does the Node, JavaScript, Azure stuff these days. He's a regular on Adventures in Angular. And then we talked to Chris Dias and PJ Meyer, as well as Amanda Silver, about all of the goings-on with TypeScript and Visual Studio Code. And
so I work for Amanda, and Chris is a peer of mine, and so it's kind of a small world of folks on the team within Visual Studio.
Yep. Cool stuff. Well, let's go back before Microsoft, hop in the Wayback Machine, and talk about when you got into programming. How did you get into programming?
Yeah, so I got into it. In my house, we actually didn't have a computer in the house till I was 15. So I was not particularly tech savvy, unfortunately. But my uncle really was. He was the clerk of court in the small town in Florida that I grew up in. And he was a bit of a pioneer in terms of using technology to, try to innovate the way that the local government provided off services for, the citizens. Mm-hmm. Whether that be making it easier to pay for parking tickets online, which of course at the time or today doesn't seem particularly novel, but back then it was. And he, was pretty active in terms of wanting to help me with advice and, beginning to think about a career, so to speak. And so he ended up kind of having me shadow and spend a little bit of time with the IT department that he had working for him, which is really kind of the first time I ever got exposed to software and, the way of thinking in terms of, the skill that you could use to solve problems and build things, if you had an idea, and at the time, like I said, I was really only just kind of having access to the internet. And so it was kind of an opening for my inspiration to get, flamed by seeing what, he was doing and, what are people using the internet for? Mm-hmm. And so that kind of naturally just led to, hey, I want to have a website. Everybody has a website. And hey, you learn a little bit here and there, and you kind of pick up more skills doing a little bit of JavaScript, although at the time there, wasn't a ton versus just trying to do as much as you could with HTML tags like marquee and blink.
Right.
But yeah, that was really the beginning. And then my best friend in high school kind of also got into it as well. And so we ended up just, while I was in high school, I did dual enrollment at the local community college taking intro. Funny enough, a lot of people kind of think, oh, you start programming learning like C or Java. Whereas me, I ended up doing VB6 in high school at the local community college during a period that I had off because I had a little bit more credits than I needed to not be in school the whole time. And so that was interesting, right? Because I kind of got into programming almost from like the most basic perspective, no pun intended. But, it quickly became something I loved because, VB6 was so amazing because in my case and many other people, you ended up not really needing a ton of, formal skills to actually begin learning little by little. And next thing you know, you're building little apps and then you just kind of incrementally improve your skills. And so from there, I ended up, going on and learning more fundamentals and, the things that people typically associate with computer science degrees. But yeah, so that was really it. Just like I said, my uncle, I really attribute him being very active in my even understanding that there could be this interest in computer programming. And then, yeah, VB6, man, it was something. And so, it was not too long after that .NET became a thing. And I wasn't particularly a Microsoft fanboy at the time, but it seemed interesting, at least from the perspective of being new, right. So kind of like if you want to get into a brand new video game, it feels intimidating to like join, a game that's been out for 2 years. And by the time you try to do online play and everybody's way better than you. So in some ways I remember feeling like .NET was like this level playing ground of like, oh yeah, I can learn this. And, some of the beginning jobs that I had, people didn't really know a lot about C# and .NET. So it kind of ended up being a way for me to feel like I could add value and be interesting more rapidly as opposed to Java, which of course, at that time was something that there were people very senior at. So yeah, nothing particularly grandiose, but yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. I think like a lot of other people probably, I think, like I mentioned, getting access to the internet and you're looking for ways to justify what you're doing with your computer. And I mean, this is back in the AOL days. So you're, I want to write an IRC bot. I want to script, AOL chat rooms.
Oh man, you're taking me back.
Yeah. So it was a lot of just kind of scrappy boredom mixed with curiosity that led to me, developing a series of miscellaneous skills that I didn't realize would lead to, actually getting into software. And then yeah, the rest is at that point not all that different from many other people. But yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's all good. I mean, it's interesting to hear the different ways that people come in and, the sorts of mentorship that people get. For me, my dad was interested in computers. He was one of he beta tested Dentrix.
Oh, okay.
Which is dental office software, back in the early 90s, back when it was kind of a revolutionary thing. And so we had a computer growing up. And anyway, it's just interesting. My mentor was my grandfather.
Yeah.
And everybody comes in a little bit differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that it necessarily matters how you come in. We're happy to have you here.
Yeah.
But
as long as you're excited when you're in.
Yeah. But I just find it fascinating. And then yeah, I think we all kind of identify with the story of, well, I learned this technology and then I wound up moving around to this other technology, and then eventually, you wind up where you're at.
Yeah. Which is certainly something that I try to keep reminding myself, because it's, easy to feel like, where we're at in our career is, some statement of who we are, but really at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, it's a long series of opportunities and luck and, coincidence, I've been very fortunate and had good projects and things to work on that have kept the experience and the journey super interesting so far.
Yep. Now, you mentioned that you were doing Node.js on Azure, and that's what we had you on the show to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, how did you get into JavaScript?
Yeah, I mean, really, like I was saying, I had done some desktop development when I first got into software, largely because that was the projects that I was getting the opportunity to do. But, I quickly got into web development, but in the beginning of, my software career, that was, of course, traditional. I did PHP, I did Cold Fusion, like I mentioned, I did ASP.NET. It was all very much server driven, quote unquote post back type web apps. And it was actually one of the jobs I had. I was working at a newspaper in their software division, and one of the other programmers on the team, I vividly remember the day he was talking about something I'd never heard of called Ajax. And I mean, for many people probably remember that too. It was almost like the first time that it was like, wow, I guess it's not just, because JavaScript was less of a skill in the community and more of like, well, if I can't do it with like HTML and CSS, I guess I'll figure out what to do. Because this is even pre jQuery. And so, yeah, Ajax in that world, and like, hey, look what people are beginning to do. It was inspiring because it, of course, challenged a new level of richness in apps, not just, using JavaScript as like this random consequence of, well, that's what you need to do for the web to achieve this feature.
Yep.
And so I was heavily inspired by that developer on that team. And, I think I ended up, there were some really early JavaScript user groups in the area that I was living at, which was Sarasota, Florida. The subsequent releases of ASP.NET also began to, heavily favor and introduce additional capabilities to do more client-side development. And then jQuery came out. And I just became very inspired by pushing those boundaries and like, I want to write apps that feel better, work better, and ride that wave kind of as the browsers start to become more rich, which is, of course, was a long journey because it kind of felt like it took a while to get to the point where we're at now. But hey, we take a lot for granted of what you can do with JavaScript. So yeah, that was 15 years ago. And so when I joined Microsoft, I was, working on the ASP.NET team, really, really interested in, rich client, web development. Then I, had the opportunity to work on the IE developer tools team for a few years. Now the Edge tools. And then I worked on Cordova tooling in Visual Studio and React Native tooling. And, I got to work on various developer services for Cordova and React Native development, one of which called Code Push, which kind of let you do out of band updates to mobile apps that didn't need to go through the store. Yeah. And then now, then I wanted to help improve the Node developer experience on Azure. So really my passion has pretty much been in JavaScript and web for over the last 10 years. And it really just got started by, happening to work with people that were very well connected and watching the latest trends and kind of helped me tune into it, back when it was kind of the stone age for web development, but still exciting because, it was that pivot point of, hey, we knew you could do kind of stuff on the client side, but it was just easier to do everything on the server. And then Ajax came around and it was like, okay, I guess we have to actually start thinking about this more seriously. JavaScript is a skill, not just like a checkbox. So yeah, that's kind of my story. And then, I mean, with me, I would say that the reason I've stayed because like how I got into it was partly necessity, but also partly, industry trends. But I've continued to stay, and my passion is in the JavaScript and web community just because, at least for me, and this is quite subjective, but it continues to be the source of, inspiration and excitement in terms of, my interests and skill set in software development. Some people, of course, think that, there's definitely a fatigue element to it. But I'm a bit of a glutton for pain in terms of learning new skills. And so, yeah, I love how much the community challenges themselves, and you continue to see, new trends that end up coming from the JavaScript community. And even the people that are not necessarily big fans of JavaScript, have still had to come to respect the fact that there's a lot of great work that come from, the community of people, whether it be, the Electron sub-community or, React Native or Angular or Vue.js. It's a really inspiring ecosystem to be a part of. And I love working on developer tooling and services and working with people in that ecosystem. So
nice. So I'm curious, what's it like working on the developer tools as opposed to necessarily doing the development, like web development and things like that?
Yeah, it's very different. Like I remember, because before I joined Microsoft, I had worked at a handful of ISVs and agencies and, consultant shops where, there was a lot of fun for me in the sense that you are building very specific applications for very specific customers or industries. And so you can see the fruit of your labor of like, wow, I helped, X company scale their success, and I can, see and think about that. I can go to that website and remember how fun it was, the late nights to deliver that. And of course, you learn something about that industry as well, right? Like usually if you're going and building a e-commerce site for construction, equipment or dentistry, you end up kind of acquiring a lot of interesting points of knowledge by working with these people in those fields. And so I really enjoyed that time. Coming to Microsoft, I think it was interesting because, working on tools and platforms targeting JavaScript development in a way is just a forcing function to have to learn certain things at a level deeper than I would have maybe otherwise. Mm-hmm. It's like, one of the first things I worked on in Visual Studio was a revamp of the editor in Visual Studio for JavaScript. And by that, I mean support for auto completion, formatting, everything to the simple stuff that we take for granted of when you hit, enter on a line, making sure that the cursor goes to the right indentation level that you would expect versus having to manually tab or space. And so when I worked on that, it was the first time I had to go and read the ECMAScript spec and learn at a much more formal level the JavaScript language and the semantics of, what's valid and what's not. Mm-hmm. And that was very interesting, kind of on a very different level. And, also, it's fun to kind of work with a very broad global community of JavaScript developers and seeing the vast difference of requirements and scenarios they have, and then working with them to understand how to satisfy those requirements in a way that works for, as many people as possible without creating something convoluted that has a bunch of one-offs that, is not very usable for anybody. So yeah, it's a very different beast. And, I think there's pros and cons to both. I definitely, mm-hmm. I like to scratch the itch of doing actual app development once in a while, usually helping out my family members or friends. Probably a lot of us at Microsoft do that. My brother has a pretty successful satellite phone business that I get the pleasure of helping him work on his website once in a while, and that's pretty nice. But yeah, I think it's just really, the ecosystem as a whole works better when you have people that are optimizing their focus on different layers of abstraction. And so I enjoy the time that I have on tools and services. But yeah, it's different. But yeah, it's really exciting.
Cool. Is there anything that you've built or worked on in some of these tools that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, there's been a lot of stuff. I mean, I would say when I worked on the IE developer tools, the area that I ended up investing a lot of my energy on was the profiling tools. So like memory profiling and CPU profiling and network profiling. And I was proud of, on one side, our goal was to, how could we help simplify profiling, which in many ways is a skill that not every developer has had the opportunity to acquire. How could we simplify it to a point that it became more ubiquitous for web devs to, not necessarily do it all the time, but if you're working on a feature or, you're wanting to do some basic performance analysis, how simple could we make that? And, when I worked on it, obviously, like many projects, I moved off, at some point, and I don't think we got to necessarily achieve the level of simplicity that I would have loved to have gotten to at that point. I still found it really rewarding to work with users and web developers and see that progression of people that hadn't ever really thought about memory analysis, for example, come to this point where it's like, wow, I was able to, within a few minutes find a memory leak that we would have never been able to solve, which was fun, right? Because you have a lot of web developers that came from maybe a background of having done mostly server-side applications where you don't have to care as much about memory on the client side because you'll just refresh the page and, you effectively do a massive GC.
Right.
Whereas you now are building significant, very rich client applications that people might leave running for a long time that you want to be very reliable. And so it was cool, to try to help build tools that can kind of meet people where they're at and say, hey, you might not realize that you've run into a need that the tools need to help pick up some slack to, simplify for you. So that was really fun. And then the other thing I think that I really enjoyed was that service I mentioned, Code Push, just because we built it and released it pretty much right at the beginning of when React Native was getting started. And, I was a big Cordova fan, just like I am with Electron, largely because, the idea of JavaScript being able to extend your skill set to another platform and make you more productive as quickly as possible is just awesome. But, React Native was really exciting because, of course, React was very exciting, and the idea of having native UI versus the web view was exciting. And so in a way, we got to build this service that was solving a really tangible problem that a lot of people recognized was a problem, but we found not many people ever did anything about it. And that was, I hate the long review times of the App Store.
Right.
Hate getting bug reports from my customers that, we can't give them a tangible ETA because it could take days to get the update out to them. And so it was kind of a twofold thing that was exciting. One was getting to ride the wave of excitement and ideas of React Native from the ground up. At the same time, getting to help people realize, like, hey, how we've always talked about doing these out of band, over the air updates. What if it was so simple that you couldn't not do it? And so, like, working with people to try to, much like the performance profiling, how do we make this opportunity become, very, very natural as part of your workflow? And I loved working on that project. That was probably, one of my more exciting and fun projects that I got to work on. That was a couple of years ago. But the stuff I'm working on now is also equally exciting. So yeah, probably Code Push and the IE, now Edge developer tools. I really liked my time working on those.
Nice. And I can tell you that I've talked to plenty of React Native and Cordova developers that I don't think they could live without Code Push. I mean, it's just, it does. It takes away all the pain that you brought up as I guess, spelling out this as a solution.
Yeah.
It's just a really convenient way to stay on top of a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun in some ways. And this is a bit, of course, egotistical and me just trying to, but I used to always think about it, in the same way that Ajax was like this thing that people knew they wanted to do, but it took a little while before it became so simple that everybody did it. Once you had the library and framework support, in some ways, I like finding those challenges where it's, problems that many people recognize they would like to solve, they would like to do, but the tooling or the platforms are just not there yet to make it a slam dunk because people, we're all very busy, right? Like within our team, it's like we always like to say, how do you help somebody solve a problem over their lunch hour, right? And if they get confused and they get hung up, then you failed those, that person. Not in an altruistic way, just in I'm like this, right? When I get home at the end of the day, I'm going to play with my kids and spend time with my wife, but I have that 45-minute commute on the bus where I'm going to look into something. And if I can feel like I achieved something, I'm probably going to keep going with that product. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, I like working on those kind of challenges. And Code Push was definitely one of them.
Nice. Well, I know that you are now working on some of the other tooling, and you mentioned before we started recording, you mentioned what you were working on. I actually got to see it in action somewhat at Microsoft Connect. So why don't you go ahead and talk about the stuff you're doing with Visual Studio Code and the live sharing feature that they announced there? Yeah.
So, over the last, 6 or so months, I've been working on a handful of, capabilities that are really aimed at trying to improve developer collaboration. And one of which is something that, as you mentioned, we released at Connect, or we announced at Connect, called Visual Studio Live Share. And really what that is it's an attempt to help developers work together in a way that is more natural than they might be able to otherwise, using solutions that we have today, all of which are really good, by the way. Screen sharing, Slack, JS Fiddle, Slack snippet sharing. There's a lot, or, Git, right? Collaborating that way. There's a lot of great solutions, but, each of them are more catered to specific scenarios than others. And what we really found was that, many developers have their own personal setup, whether that's I'm using VS Code on a Mac with my specific theme and this font and my window placement, and you're on, Windows with VS or, another editor. And there's so many levels of customization that go into you and I feeling comfortable with our setup. And so really kind of what we sought out to achieve is how can we make it such that you and I can collaborate without having to pull each other out of our comfort zone, so to speak. And so what LiveShare is a way for, a developer using currently VS and VS Code to simply share the project they're working on with n number of other developers. And that does not require them to learn any new tools or use a litany of services, or upload, your code to some centralized service, simply to have a shared coordination spot. It's almost like you're projecting or remoting your current environment, but in a way that is, sharing your context, so to speak, not your screen. And so you from VS or VS Code can join my live share session. We're both seeing the same project, the files. You can do navigation capabilities, auto-completion, refactoring, and that's all going to work off of the language services that I have on my machine. We can debug the project collaboratively. We can edit the files collaboratively in real time. So very, Google Docs-esque. Many people, say Google Docs for developers. We have capabilities for sharing the debug output, for sharing application ports. So if we're doing ASP.NET or Node development, I from my VS Code instance can share with you, hit F5, And now when you join me from VS or VS Code, it doesn't matter. You'll jump into that debug session. We can both step, but you'll also see the app running on your machine that's coming from mine. And so that removes a lot of those, doesn't repro for me problems if I'm seeking help from you because I'm hitting a bug in this work item that I'm trying to track, or I need your advice because I noticed that, you touched this file last and I'm trying to change something and I'm just looking for a little bit more clarity. Mm-hmm. And so really it's kind of trying to help provide that seamless, natural collaboration in your tool while still providing the ability to share more than just files, right? Because you could just zip up your project and send it to me, which of course is static. And so having the ability for developers to collaboratively edit in real time, as well as the need arises, collaboratively debug, collaboratively run the application, and you can imagine other scenarios to make the life cycle of app development more collaborative as well, that holistically kind of make up what we think is an interesting new interaction pattern for developers that are not necessarily just remote, but maybe you're working from home. Maybe, we talk to a lot of people that they're all in the same building, but you might be on different floors, or you're on the other side of the building, or it's just more natural and easy for you to not have to get up and walk over to somebody's desk to talk to them about it. And so, yeah, in a way, it's exciting because, collaboration and teamwork, we all know there's those famous, insights that a lot of times we spend more time reading code than writing it. And, certainly if that's true, and, teams are best, our velocity is highest when we're working together, then it just feels like the better we can improve collaboration and make it easier for developers to work together in a way that doesn't require you to have to just, you stare at my screen while I'm doing something. If you want to take control, you have to tell me what to do. And,
yeah,
maybe you're not familiar with, the tool that I'm using, and so you kind of have to orient yourself. Like for me, even the simplest thing of any time I'm trying to help somebody and I'm now having to type on their keyboard, it's like it takes me like a minute to calibrate just the keyboard, let alone, the OS environment and, their IDE and editor. And those little things can add up as you are doing more frequent pair programming or doing code reviews collaboratively, or seeking help on a bug, etc. And so if you can save that time and that barrier of entry, then we're excited to see how much that can help teams, be more successful.
Yep, absolutely. And it's fascinating. I mean, we've had a lot of these technologies for a while, but the ability to sort of go beyond just the screen sharing, or go beyond how you have things configured different for me, and allow me to just operate on the code as naturally as I would, even though it's a project that you're working on. That was the thing that really appealed to me.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of great, I want to give a shout out to, there's so many great tools out there today that enable collaboration. But in some cases, you have to learn one or more of those. So you have NGRock if you want to do, internet tunneling of you have a web app on your machine and I want you to see it, but we're not on the same subnet. That's an amazing tool. People that are very comfortable from the command line, using tmux and having somebody SSH into your machine is also another really great workflow, but not everybody's comfortable with that. And so, we're trying to, with LiveShare, make it such that, how is it that these capabilities to collaborate at a very rich level, the barrier of entry is as close to zero as possible, because if you're already using VS and VS Code, it's just a matter of clicking the button to say share. And then everything else from there is what you would already do. Mm-hmm. So if you want to debug with the person, you just hit F5 and then that's it. And so, I think, we're pretty excited to see how they use it.
Yep, absolutely. Is there anything else you're working on now that you want to talk about? I think this tool kind of speaks for itself. And if you're still not sure exactly what we're talking about, go watch the talk from, or the keynote from Microsoft Connect, and that'll give you some idea. I think if you see it, you'll see why we're both excited about it.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, really, I'm working on a few other things, but nothing particularly that interesting and relevant to share. Really, live share is my focus right now. And so excited to hear feedback from people.
Awesome. All right. So the last part of this podcast is picks.
Yeah.
And you were on the show before, so you know how picks work. Do you have some things you want to shout out about?
Do you run your own freelance business? Or maybe you're thinking about picking up some business on the side? Well, then you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the quickest and easiest way to get invoices out to your clients. It's easy to use. It works anywhere, available from any device on the desktop, iPhone, iPad, Android, and all of your data is backed up and secure. And it makes it really easy to get organized and get paid. You'll be tracking time, logging expenses, and invoicing your clients in no time. You can also save time billing, freeing up several days per month to focus on the work that you love, and you get paid faster. FreshBooks customers are paid on average 5 days faster because there's a link on the invoice that says pay me now. And it's a great way to grow your business. Plus, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day trial. That's right, 30-day trial if you try them out. So go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Once again, for a 30-day trial, go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section.
I do. I have two picks. One is an app called Notion. And the reason I want to bring this up is it is a note-taking app for individuals and teams, which there are many of them. But I was on a quest personally to find something easier and better for my workflow, for effectively capturing little bits of knowledge that I acquire, every day in a way that I can find it again, and organize the way that my mind, seems to index and catalog information. And it took me a while to find one, but there's this app called Notion that has an iOS, a web, and an Electron desktop client that I'm in love with. And I mainly want to shout it out because I feel like every week on Twitter I'm seeing somebody else saying, please, dear God, help me with a recommendation for a good note-taking app. And so, if anybody listening has that same question, I've really enjoyed the app. The second shout out is, randomly, I just came back from parental leave, was out 3 months, speaking baby speak and loving life. And weirdly enough, I got on kind of a metal music kick. And so recently this band that I just discovered called Architects released a new album called Doomsday. That is really awesome. I've been listening to it while coding lately. There's vocals, but it's enough unintelligibleness that it kind of doesn't distract you. But it's really good. So anybody that's interested in that genre, I would recommend it very highly.
Nice. I'm going to go ahead and do a pick and what we've termed, I guess, on these shows, an anti-pick.
Okay.
So my wife has some back pain, and we wound up a number of years ago getting a bed that, solved a lot of those issues for her back. And when we bought the bed, they promised us that the bed would last us, 20 years. In fact, they had a 20-year warranty on it. Within the first 10 years, you would get a, full replacement, no cost, no nothing. And then the second 10 years, it would go down every year. Right. And so we had the bed for about 8 years, and it started giving her back pain. So I called them up and tried to redeem the warranty, and they told me to forget it. So I am mostly just coming out here to let people know, because I've probably talked about the bed before, and I want to retract any endorsement I've given to it. The company's IntelliBed, and yeah, if you want to buy the bed, just keep in mind that if you have any problems with it, they won't honor the warranty. The flip side is that we did buy a new bed, and I'm pretty happy with it. It's from Tuft & Needle, and it's kind of along the lines of the Caspers or the Purples. There are a number of companies out there that do kind of the same thing. So they send you a foam bed, you pull it out of the box, and you cut the box open,
and the thing takes up half the room. And anyway, but they give you 100 nights, free trial. And they also, all of these have like a forever long warranty. But I've been pretty happy with what we've gotten from them. So so far, I'm pretty happy with it. So if you're looking for a bed and you've got some kind of back pain, I recommend that you try out some of these foam mattresses first, because they give you that 100-night warranty. So you sleep on it for a month or two, figure out if it's going to work for you, and then if it doesn't, then you can send it back and try a different one. So yeah, so I'm gonna pick Tuft & Needle and warn people away from IntelliBed.
I'm actually looking for a bed, so I will keep your recommendation in mind.
Yep. Cool. Well, if people want to see what you're working on these days or anything like that, do you have a blog or Twitter or GitHub that people ought to look at?
Yeah, I haven't been blogging lately, so I would just recommend people look me up on either Twitter or GitHub. My my handle is Lost in Tangent, and I'm pretty active on both. I would love to hear from folks that are interested in live share or JavaScript and VS Code and Azure, or all of the above. Anything that we talked about today, I'd love to hear from folks.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thanks for coming, Jonathan.
Thank you so much.
All right. We will catch everyone next week.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.